Norwich away then. Kick-off is at midday on Saturday, which, if you've been availing yourself of the post-lockdown lock-ins of a Friday night, will probably be about breakfast time. Or if you live in Leicester, lunchtime. The match is on one of the BT channels. Well, there's no nice way of dressing this up. They're going down. They've got 21 points from the 34 games played so far, which is 10 points from a safety spot. Defeat in this one will therefore see them relegated with 3 games left to play. The enforced break has had little effect on their form. In the 6 games prior to the break, they won just the one, 1-0 at Leicester, drew one, 0-0 up at Newcastle, and lost the rest to practically everyone else. Since the return, it's been red ink all the way, with Sheffield United, Everton, Brighton, Arsenal and Watford all getting the better of them. Their last run out was the 2-1 defeat at Watford, in which, despite their having taken the lead, you never quite felt that they had the required oomph to hold on to the advantage. One rather gets the impression that, to Delia and company, the Premier League isn't the be-all and end-all of things. If they can get up there from time to time, all well and good. However, the club is run well enough from a financial perspective so that relegation would not be the pecuniary disaster that it might be for other clubs, us for example, whose budgets are predicated on the club being in the top flight. Based on that premise, it is perhaps unsurprising that they didn't shell out much back in the January window. Daisy, the socially distant personal assistant with the beautiful smile, tells me that there were 4 arrivals at Norwich Airport, assuming such a place actually exists. First to arrive was midfielder Lucas Rapp. He signed for a fee described as undisclosed, but Daisy reckons it was about the £5 million mark. He does have a few years under his belt with Borussia Mönchengladbach, but much of that time was spent out on loan at Paderborn, another place that may or may not have its own airport. He arrived at Hoffenheim via Stuttgart, but even at Hoffenheim he averaged a little over 10 league appearances per season. Assuming that Norwich does actually have an airport, it is unlikely that their second signing of the winter window ever got to see it. French midfielder Melvin City arrived from Ligue 2, which is French for League 2, side Sochaux, before immediately being loaned back until the end of the season, which will be any month now. The fee paid for City, which is French for sofa, was also undisclosed, but is believed to run to only a few £100,000 or so. The third signing was young left-back Sam McCullum, for whom £3.5 million was paid to Coventry. He wouldn't have used the airport if it exists, but the question is somewhat academic as, like Sofa, he was immediately loaned back to the club whence he came. The final arrival was Slovakian midfielder Ondrej Duda, who arrived on loan from Hertha Berlin, having fallen out with favour with Hertha boss Jurgen Klinsmann. Duda has over 30 caps for the Slovakian full international side. The saddest thing is that the need to play behind closed doors will rob us all of the chance to discover whether or not the more inventive amongst the Canaries support have been able to come up with an appropriate chant utilising the melody of the Camptown races. Probably one of the brighter features of an otherwise undistinguished season has been the continued development of midfielder Todd Cantwell. He's a Norfolk lad, no airport for him then, and emerged in last season's promotion side, having played 24 matches. He's been a regular this season, and there is much paper talk as to where he might be playing his trade next term. However, the most important thing you need to know about him is that he is absolutely no relation to former Hammer Noel. Cantwell has been struggling with a thigh problem in recent weeks. The usual sites rate him at no more than 50-50 to feature. Definitely out are Grant Hanley, thigh, Christoph Zimmermann, thigh, and former Hammer Sam Byron, thigh. The final absentee will be Moritz Leitner, whose hernia problem prevented him from being around when the thigh virus was doing the rounds. The top scorer is Finnish striker Timo Pukki, who has 11. He hasn't been on target since netting a 70th minute penalty against Spurs back on the 22nd of January. Mind you, it's a bit unfair to single him out really. The whole team's only scored 3 in the 10 league matches played since then. Meanwhile, there's not much been happening in the wild and wacky world of association football that is worthy of note. VAR is still rubbish. The football authorities have shelved the decision on when the summer transfer window should open, whilst north of the border, Hearts and Partick Thistle are taking legal action against Dundee, Wraith Rovers and Cove Rangers over who should be relegated or promoted or something. The season ended in some sort of chaos up there. The latter 3 clubs have asked the rest of the league to chip in towards their legal cost, it being hoped that a few £1,000 will at very least help to ease the gripes of Wraith. And so to us. Disappointed is how I would sum that up. Yes, we had chances, at least 2 of which we really ought to have buried, And yes, I know it's all about fine margins. However, the fact is that we didn't take those chances and we were totally lacking in the guile and subtlety to break down a Burnley side that appeared to consist solely of 10-foot-tall defenders, one of whom had no right to actually be on the pitch. Tarkowski's assault on Bowen was a deliberate attempt to injure a fellow professional, and any match official who thinks otherwise has no right to be in charge of a professional football match. It is often said, by some particularly ignorant people it has to be said, that Michael Oliver is the best referee in the league. Whether or not that is true, it should be remembered that that particular accolade does not require the clearance of a particularly high bar. It's akin to being the most intelligent Spurs supporter, the least irritating person on TV called Piers Morgan, or the most honest person called Mike Dean. Even as I speak, Oliver has been on VAR duty this evening, and, okay, hilariously, Spurs have been denied a penalty because Oliver is either too stupid or too dishonest to give what he's just seen, using 28 different UHD angles. Similarly, Manchester United were today given a penalty just when they needed it. No change there then, and VAR confirmed it. A later statement from the authorities confirmed that the decision was incorrect, but they made no comment on what sanction would be given to two officials who deliberately altered the result of a match. And where the hell was VAR in our match? 24 hours before, we saw it being used for an identical challenge in the Leicester versus Arsenal match, where we saw a yellow getting upgraded to a red. Why on earth wasn't it used for what any reasonable person would count as an even worse challenge? The use of VAR, it seems, depends on which club is involved, and if you're one of PGMOL's favoured few, you can usually rely on its blind eye being turned to your advantage. Back to the match itself, and though I'm not a fan of the current manager, you can tell, can't you? I've been happy to give him credit where it's due in recent weeks. However, it seems he reverted to type in the Burnley match, leaving it far too late to make a second change. Quite what he expected of Ajeti, even had he been able to get him on in the 83rd minute, Lord alone knows. As it was, it took another 4 minutes for the ball to go out, leaving him with even less time. As for Dyche, well, we all know his views on diving. I'd love to know if he could maybe make some sort of similar comment on time wasting and feigning injury. For this week, we're down to 2 in the treatment room. Anderson's hamstring puts him at 50-50 for an appearance, whilst it looks like no more Snodgrass for this season. Prediction? Well, personally, I'd revert to the starting 11 that we used against Chelsea and Newcastle. Lanzini is likely to be afforded more freedom than he might have had against Burnley, and swapping things around to accommodate Yarmolenko from the start seemed to unbalance things last weekend. If we can do that, and can banish the events of the other night from our collective mind, this should be a 3-pointer. Even if Norwich do get 11 behind the ball, they're unlikely to be as good at it as Burnley were. For one thing, it isn't in their DNA, and for another, they actually need 3 points if they have any mathematical chance of staying up. Although even the most loyal of Canaries would probably concede that they're on their way out, there is always that psychological thing of clinging on to hope until the logarithms prove otherwise, I suppose. So let's get back on track, and yes, I know we haven't picked up maximum league points up there since the 1970s, but I still think we ought to have enough to do the job this time. Mr. Winston, please place the £2.50 that would have been spent on a new brain cell for Michael Oliver and put it on our away win. Let's call it a 3-1 to us then. Enjoy the game.